Sir Henry agreed to come. After all, they were going to be neighbours. We arrived at Stapleton's house around 6 o'clock. It was a small cottage with a white stone wall surrounding it, and a large wooden outhouse at the side of the house. Stapleton was a good host, and seemed very eager to be friends with Sir Henry. We had a meal and talked over brandy and cigar. It was late by the time we left the little cottage, and it was only the light of the moon that lit our way as we walked across the moors. Sir Henry said jokingly that the legend warned all Baskervilles never to cross the moors in those dark hours when the devil Hound was about. As if in answer to his words, there arose that same blood-curdling cry I had heard with Stapleton. It echoed across the moors, then rolled away. "Good God, Watson, that sounded like a hound!" cried Sir Henry. From the break in his voice, I could tell he was frightened. "It's one thing to laugh about in London, and another to stand out here in the dark and hear that cry. I feel really cold. Am I really in danger?" Immediately I began to hurry him home to Baskerville Hall. As I looked up, I noticed in a distance, standing on a large rock outlined in black against the night sky, was the figure of a man watching us. I pointed him out to Sir Henry, but in the time it took Sir Henry to turn his head, the man had gone. But I was not mistaken. I had seen him, and I was soon to have proof of this from Barrymore. He said that a local village boy went daily to the stranger hiding out in the abandoned village of Black Tor, taking food and blankets. Barrymore was upset. He said the moors were scary enough without a stranger hiding on them. It seemed both Barrymore and I were thinking along the same lines. Had the stranger anything to do with the Hound? We were both concerned for Sir Henry's safety. I decided what to do. The next morning, I woke up early. I packed a flask of tea and my revolver and made my way to Black Tor. I searched each abandoned house in turn until, in one house, I found a bottle of brandy, some blankets, and a makeshift bed. I was certain I'd tracked down the stranger's hiding place. It was mid-afternoon as I sat down to wait. As twilight fell, I heard a noise coming from outside, like the sound of footsteps. I crept into the darkest corner and held my pistol drawn. Whoever it was stopped outside the doorway. There was a long silence. Then a voice said, "Why don't you come outside, Watson? It's a beautiful evening." For a moment I could hardly believe my ears. "Holmes!" I cried. "Come out," he said, "and be careful with that pistol." Well, I was overjoyed to see him. Holmes questioned me about where I had been, what I had done, and who I had met. And when I mentioned the name Jack Stapleton, Holmes said that he was not the nice person he pretended to be. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Behind that smiling, friendly face, he is calmly plotting murder. Cold-blooded and deliberate murder. I can't explain the details now. My plans are closing in on him as his are on Sir Henry. The only trouble is he will strike first. Not a word of this to Sir Henry." Holmes told me that there was no need for him to remain in hiding, and we returned to Baskerville Hall together. Sir Henry was pleased to see Holmes. "How's the case going, Mr. Holmes? Have you made any sense of it yet?" he asked. Holmes said that the matter would be solved if, when the time came, Sir Henry was to do exactly as Holmes told him, without question. To this, Sir Henry agreed. Sir Henry had told us that Stapleton had called round earlier that afternoon, and had invited Sir Henry and myself round for dinner the following day, and asked if Holmes would like to join us. Before I could say a word, Holmes answered, "I'm afraid not, as Watson and I must be in London on important business." This was news to me, but I kept quiet. "I'd like to go to London too," said Sir Henry. "You must stay here," replied Holmes. "Remember you agreed to follow all my instructions without question. Tomorrow you will go to your friend Stapleton's house and have supper. Afterwards you will leave by the moor path that leads across Grimpen Moors. Tell Stapleton you intend to do this." "But that's the very thing you told me never to do," said Sir Henry. "Trust me," replied Holmes. "This time you can do it in safety. It will take great courage, and you must not stray from the moor path. Keep to that path at all cost." I was confused by all of this, as was Sir Henry, but I said nothing. When Sir Henry had gone to bed, Holmes and I walked around the big house, looking at portraits and pictures on the walls. Then Holmes went back to one. It was the wicked Sir Hugo who had started it all. Holmes held a light up to it and said, "Look at it, Watson." I did so. I noticed the thin lips and the cold eyes. "Now look again." Holmes stood on a chair and held one hand over the mouth and covered the black curling hair so that only the face was visible. I stood back in amazement. The likeness between the painting and the man that we knew as Jack Stapleton was beyond belief. "It looks like Stapleton," I gasped. Holmes laughed. "Yes, Stapleton must have Baskerville blood in him. Now we can guess why he's such an enemy to Sir Henry. Never mind, tomorrow night we shall trap him. Not a word of this to Sir Henry." The next morning, Holmes and I set off for the train station. The presence of the driver meant that we could not talk openly. When we got to the station, Holmes waited until the coach was out of sight. Then he told me that we were not going anywhere. Part of his plan was to make Stapleton believe we were in London, so that he would feel safe to attack Sir Henry. I was not completely surprised. Sherlock Holmes rarely told his full plan to anyone, including myself. We had a drink and talked some more. Holmes showed me pictures and documents linking Stapleton to other parts of the country under different names. We barely said a word on the coach on the way back, and I felt my heart beating fast once we reached the moor gates. Holmes paid the driver, and we walked across the moors together towards Stapleton's home. We stopped about 500 yards from the house. "This will do," said Holmes. "These rocks will give us cover."